Welcome, everybody, to the Misremembering a Mandela Effect podcast. My name is Billy.
I'm Scott.
Welcome back. We are excited to have our first full official episode right now. Last week was our teaser, just kind of explaining a little bit about what the Mandela Effect was, our excitement around the podcast, and today is our first episode. I'm excited. Are you excited, Scott?
I am. I am excited because this is one that I honestly I didn't know about. So that excites me.
Yeah, I found out about this one in particular a month ago, maybe. I was having a conversation, as we talked about last week. I love talking about it. And I was having a conversation with one of my wife's friends. Shout out to Nikki if she's listening. But I was having a conversation with her, and I was talking about the Mandela Effect, and she said, "Yeah, have you heard about this one?" And I said, "No, that's not one. Like, I've studied the list, pretty extensively over the last 4 years, ever since you and I started talking about it, and never heard of it." And apparently, I think I mentioned this last week too, but apparently it got really hot on TikTok. It was going around, or social media, Instagram, something, where that's kind of how it got noticed the first time was through social media, and it got really hot. And I had seen, just in some research, there were podcasts about it. There were some YouTube channels that covered it a little bit. So we're not the first ones to cover it, but it is interesting because it is our first episode officially. So we're kind of on the tail end of the trend from 2 months ago, but that's all right. We don't need to be at the front end. We just need to have better content, right? So
That's right.
All right. So it's now the time. Do we announce what this week's episode's about?
I think it is. I think the listeners are clamoring. I think Nikki's real excited. She's sitting at home going, "What did I say? I don't even remember what it is. I don't even know who Nikki is."
She might remember, she might not, but if she does, then she's definitely ready for us to say it. So this week's episode is about the phrase, the bucket list. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, how is that possibly a Mandela effect? That is how I was thinking too. But the truth is that before the movie The Bucket List with Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson, the phrase, my bucket list, the bucket list, your bucket list, no recorded evidence anywhere that anyone ever spoke those words or read those words or typed those words, which I don't believe, because I actually got into a heated debate with somebody else afterwards saying, I remember my parents saying those words. I remember saying them myself, putting together a list when I was younger. I feel like I remember doing what's on my bucket list of things I would want to do before I died.
Right.
And I was born before 2007. So, so a part of me still feels like maybe the alternate dimension thing is real. And, somehow we're crossing paths here, because I would swear by it.
I don't. This is the thing. I was trying to, in my head, prepping for this episode. I'm thinking, did I ever use that term 2007? So I'm did I ever use that term prior to 2007? Well, obviously I'm not going to remember that. But what I do remember is exactly what you said. I do remember when I was in high school putting together a list of things I wanted to do before I died. I would assume the only thing that would motivate me to do that is the term the bucket list. And I was in high school well before 2007. I graduated in 2004. But I remember in high school doing this. I also remember when the movie came out not wondering, what's a bucket list? You know what I mean? You knew what the concept of the movie was as it was coming out. It was not a surprise to anybody.
Yep, absolutely. And, I did some digging after Nikki brought it up and had that second conversation, thinking there's just no way, maybe I'm being punked or something, because people know I like the Mandela effect a lot. And according to Google, if you want to believe Google, I don't know if they censor things for the sake of the Mandela effect. They might. But the only reference anyone can find about the phrase bucket list is found in an author's biography, but their biography was updated in 2011 for that book that they wrote. So who's to say if it was in there before 2011? There's no record of their biography in whatever book they wrote, the little author's bio part. There's no reference in the earlier versions, apparently. The reference is in the 2011 updated version. So they're saying that it was coined for the film, not the other way around. And I still don't feel right about it.
Okay, I'm trying to think, like, is the reason that no one can find anything written on the internet about it prior to 2007 is because people just didn't use the internet prior to 2007 like they do now? But I don't know. Like, I'm trying to remember that. Like, how often was I on the internet in 2007? I was using BitTorrent, I can tell you that, for things.
I mean, I was on Kazaa. If you remember Kazaa, I was downloading music.
Is that okay? So that's like LimeWire and Napster.
LimeWire. It was post Napster because Napster was in the midst of a large lawsuit. So there was Kazaa, LimeWire. Yeah, I mean, I didn't like Google things.
No, I didn't either.
In high school.
Not very often.
No,
definitely not in high school. No.
I think and we grew up where, we wrote papers on a laptop. I had a laptop when I was in high school. My parents got me one when I was a senior. We had computers at school. We had a computer at home. I wrote all my papers on a computer, not a typewriter. I didn't write them out. So, I was on the computer a lot.
Yeah, me too.
It's times have changed so much over the last 15 years that, YouTube wasn't, it was around, but it wasn't like a thing.
No.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's a good point, but like, it kind of goes back to the concept of like the internet's supposed to encapsulate everything that has ever happened. Someone's documented it somewhere on the internet by now. So you'd think that somebody, if it existed, they would have posted about it in a blog, a vlog, some other form of media for us, right?
I imagine. Wouldn't the movie have been hyped? Well, I guess that's around the time of the movie, so you can't really say that the term was used before. I'm wondering if you go back, and I didn't do this, but if you go back and you watch the trailer for the movie, does the trailer explain to you what a bucket list is? Or does the trailer assume that you know? Is the trailer assuming that you know what this is? Because if that's true, then, I don't know.
So, I've never seen the movie.
I haven't either.
We talked about this briefly, before the recording, but I've never had anyone like say, hey, let's sit down and watch the bucket list. And, when we were in college, that's when it came out. And it wasn't like all my friends were just itching to get to the theaters to see the bucket list. But I kind of wish I would have, so that I could be like, man, this whole concept is new. Because it doesn't seem new to me. But maybe if I was one of the first ones in the theater at midnight when it released, I'm watching it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this whole concept, this idea of checking things off your bucket list it's genius. But I just don't feel that way.
Right. Hard to believe that they would just create that for a movie. I remember now, I'm like in my head remembering that Morgan Freeman in the movie trailer goes, well, it's a bucket list. So I do remember him explaining what the bucket list is. I think I remember that.
So maybe we should back up just one second to talk through this idea. So the phrase actually for the movie when they titled it Bucket List, it actually was derived from the saying, when someone kicks the bucket, they
Yes.
die. So before you die, you have a list of things you want to do. So it makes sense that it would be called a bucket list. But that's where they're saying it came from, was from another saying that is not a Mandela effect. To kick the bucket is not a Mandela effect.
No.
That is a real thing. People have said that forever. So, I mean, maybe that's what we're thinking of. Like we're just correlating the two, saying they were always around together. But I still don't feel like that's the case. And I can't make heads or tails of it, truthfully.
It's pretty. Have you looked on Reddit for this?
So I don't look to Reddit as my news source or my source of truth for anything. I do peruse Reddit, but now I'm interested, so I'm gonna go.
I'm checking some stuff out on Reddit right now. There is a person who is in their mid-50s, and they are claiming that the term the bucket list was around in the 70s and 80s. Now, I was too young in the 80s, and I wasn't born in the 70s to know if this term was uttered in my childhood.
Yeah, I don't know. Now I'm like in this rabbit hole on Reddit. I'm reading all these comments.
Oh, go
people.
down this rabbit hole. This is insane. You go down this rabbit hole, and it's interesting. I see somebody says that it was mentioned in the show My Name is Earl.
That was when you're in high school, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so. That was it was before 2007, I'm pretty sure.
This person says there's a random blog post from 2004. It's librarianavengers.com, but when I click on the link, librarianavengers.org, when I click on it, it's a broken link. Oh, we're loading now. Never mind. Graduation.
I wish it was broken.
Okay, so this is apparently it's from 2004, July 20th, 2004. And it's saying graduation bucket list of things I want to do after graduation. So that's years before. There's no way a trailer would have been out in 2004 for a movie in 2007. So we're already unraveling this. See, I knew. I had a feeling.
What if we disprove something on this podcast for the first time? What if we are the ones to well, I guess this person on Reddit did. But what if we do this live? And here's the other weird thing then. If all of these people have found this evidence on Reddit and they found stuff and you can go back on the Wayback Machine or whatever, why is it that every major article that I pull up just Googling this, if you Google this, everything says this is part of the Mandela effect and this is it didn't exist prior to 2007 and yada yada yada.
Just a little more digging, you find stuff. I mean, here's another one from 2002 where it just says, I have a bucket list. Here it goes. And it lists 10 things. Now, it is important to remember that the idea of having a list of things you want to do before you die, that's not a Mandela effect in and of itself.
Right.
We all have those, but it's the titling of that list as a bucket list. That, we need to be very clear, that is what we're calling the Mandela effect. So I do think it's interesting because now we have two pieces of evidence, one from 2004, one from 2002, where they say bucket list. Now, Google, they're not going to do a great job of scouring the internet and bringing them to the top. When you search bucket list, it's going to be all the Mandela effect stuff. So you do have to kind of dig pretty deep to find it. Yeah.
One of the funnier things with this Reddit is that the moderator, at least the one I'm on, got so frustrated that people were saying just because you've never heard of something doesn't mean it's a Mandela effect, that they started banning people who Reddit's great. Yeah, I don't know, man. There's a lot of people blaming CERN on here.
Well, yeah, we talked about CERN briefly. I mean, the problem is with CERN, we do any research and it's going to be skewed because
For sure.
If it really is what people think it might be, there's no way that's going to be online for us. We might have to go to the dark web for that.
You got to go to dark web or Alex Jones, and that's That's it. That's your CERN information right there.
Yeah. So we, again, taking just a step back, but you were talking about how, on the internet, shouldn't we have more things? We just talked about it a little bit, how it's not going to pull up. Someone from LiveJournal or librarianavengers.org is not going to pop up ahead of larger,
Right.
larger hits. So you might have to dig pretty deep. But I was listening to a different podcast today about Elon Musk's podcast that he did on Neurolink. Are you familiar with Neurolink at all?
Oh, yeah.
So the idea that in the future you have some connection in your brain where you just jam a bunch of wires in, connect to the system, and just instantly your brain accepts data and you now have knowledge you didn't have. There's no like taking the time to study and to memorize and to learn. It just is there. Like the movie Limitless. If anyone's familiar with the movie Limitless, just, expanding all of your knowledge and understanding. So the idea of this Neuralink thing, I'm interested because I want to plug in. I want to plug in, get all the data, and know all the stuff that's BS, all the fake stuff that's been out there, all the real stuff. Because you know that once you go to the system's going to give you everything. The system's going to give you all 992 pages of web hits for bucket list. And I don't have to worry about clicking from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. It just dumps it on my brain and it's there. I grasp it. And the Mandela effect is either debunked or proven true.
Well, aren't you afraid? See, Neuralink scares me. Actually, big time. I will openly admit I like Elon Musk. I do. He does good things with his money. What I don't like is Neuralink. Neuralink terrifies me to no end. Because you're essentially giving your brain up to the internet, to anybody who can hack into it. We are already, as a society, pretty stupid. People already have Neuralinks. People who are plugged into mainstream media, and that's the only place they get their news from. You're being fed a narrative. They're pushing stuff into your brain, and so to me, the idea that we're all going to be plugged in and we're all going to be drones and we're all going to be susceptible. Man, if you're afraid of things like Russian disinformation now, what do you think they're going to do when you have a computer chip in your brain?
So that's interesting. So I get that. I never thought about that. What worries me more about Neuralink, which I know we're getting off topic a little bit, but it still is relevant because I want the truth about the Mandela effect. But what worries me more is that because of how much it's going to cost for people to do this. Now, the initial, proposal for Neuralink is that like people who are paralyzed, this will give them the ability to walk again. And so obviously great. But when it's like commercialized and when it is given to the people, it is not something that everyone's going to be able to have. And it will truly become the haves and the have-nots. Those who can afford it and those who can't. My daughter just walked in, so you might hear some interesting things if she talks. If not, if she's on camera a little bit, so you might see it on the YouTube side of things.
But, oh, yeah.
So it's going to become a haves and have-nots. Now, I remember in 2007 when the iPhone came out, those who had the iPhone were like, oh my gosh, how do you have enough money to buy a phone that costs that much? Like, everyone would pay $70 for a phone every 2 years, and that's just what you got. Or it would last even longer if you were good. I'm terrible at keeping phones for a long time, as everyone knows, but back then it was like, I can't believe you have an iPhone. And now today, if you don't have an iPhone, you have something very similar. And
I mean, homeless people have iPhones. It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, everyone has one.
I mean,
but think about it. How dangerous is this little device? And this is, again, what I'm afraid of with Neuralink, right? When I think of this thing has done more to help society and more to completely destroy society than anything ever. This is a weapon and an aid. And it's
Yeah.
100% true. Our mental health is trash now, partially because of this, because of Twitter, because of Facebook, because you're constantly connected, and if you're a kid in school, my gosh, I can't even imagine. Thank goodness when I was in school, we weren't connected like this. We have MySpace, who cares? Zanga,
MySpace
but
and
we didn't
Zanga.
have this. Yeah, yeah. I had some spicy Zangas back in the day.
Oh, I would love to dig up some old Scott Carson Zangas.
Oh, you don't.
Uh,
You would talk about people getting canceled. If I ever get famous enough that somebody goes back and finds this podcast and then decides to look up my Zanga, whatever I am doing at that time, I will for sure be canceled. There's no question about it.
Does Zanga even exist?
I think it does.
Zanga, their websites.
No.
It says Zanga 2.0 is here. Please excuse the dust while we launch Zanga 2.0. Check out
How
the
long ago was
latest
that?
news from Zanga team below. Let's see. There's no footer with a date or anything.
Zanga 2.0, coming soon.
Yeah. So who knows? But I mean, yeah. Well, I know we're getting a little off topic. So we should bring it back into. But I mean, it's all connected. All good conversation.
It's all connected.
Yeah. Yeah, I just find this so fascinating that there are now. So with each episode, there are going to be people who claim, with the Mandela death, they swear that he died in the 80s when he was in prison. They remember we talked about this. They saw the casket, they saw the funeral procession, they saw everything. Yep. They would swear by it, and
yeah,
we might get into some heated debates with each other, maybe, or with others as we go through this list of items. I mean, there are things that I don't believe. I don't feel like I'm misremembering. I don't believe like it's a Mandela effect. I think that history has changed. Someone went into history, found everything that referenced what I remember, and they changed it. And I feel like an idiot, but I would give my left leg to prove that I'm right. And that's what makes the Mandela effect so interesting, is because people are very passionate about their memories.
Well, yeah, for sure. And you can convince me that I'm going to misremember things, sure. You can convince me of that. Of course I am. But I'm also not going to misremember things that millions of other people misremember that I've never met. I again, that is like so hard for me to believe. That the amount that I would have to go in my mind to get to a place where I'm like, yeah, all of these strangers who don't believe, who've never met, who've never had a conversation, they all remember something wrong the exact same way. That's not possible, right? I mean, like, okay, that's like me saying I've never taken Italian. I don't know how to speak Italian. I've never taken Italian. I don't know how to speak it. Okay? And all of a sudden, tomorrow I wake up and I can speak Italian, and everyone says to me, well, yeah, you can speak Italian. You were always able to speak Italian, and so can all these other people that everybody in your life speaks Italian. Or no, actually everybody that lives somewhere else speaks Italian too. You all speak Italian. But we all swear we've never spoken Italian. I've never been to Italy. It wasn't offered in my high school. Why would I know how to do that?
Change in history.
It doesn't make it. Yes.
That's Neurolink. You're talking about, that is Neurolink, where you're gonna wake up one day, you forgot you were plugged in overnight, you learned Italian, and you're like, I wasn't plugged in last night. I remember unplugging, and now I got Italian in my brain.
So the idea is they can control the media and they can convince you that you're misremembering something even though you're not. Why they want to convince you of that, I don't know. And that's the question. And how did they change things? Because I agree with you. There's no way you are ever going to convince me the Berenstein Bears one. You're never going to convince me of that. I don't care. You can show me books. I don't care. It doesn't matter. And the Forrest Gump one, which is one that I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yep.
That's another one that's like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
So there's so many of these things that like what bothers me is when people just accept it. Like when people are just like, "Oh yeah, I guess I got it wrong." What? No.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, there are not many people who I've talked about the Mandela effect with who have fallen into that category. 97 to 98% of people, when I talk about it with them, I'll bring up something that I just know. Like, there are some things you bring up and they're like, oh, I never saw that movie, or, I wouldn't know how that scene played out. I never, whatever. That's fine. But there are the staples, like the Berenstein Bears.
Yeah.
I read that book in school. I read that book at home. I read that book with babysitters at other friends' house, other families. Not one time did anyone pronounce it Berenstein Bears. Ever.
No.
Never. It was always Berenstein Bears. And all the pictures now of all the book covers, Berenstein? No. I can't believe it. I can't. There's nothing in my head that will tell me that's the way it is. I would almost need to see an original copy in like some museum of like
Yes.
kids literature museum, and even then I might disbelieve it because it's like, oh well, someone can just make a book look like a first edition and dirty it up and rip some pages, but come on. I don't want to ruin the Berenstein Bears episode. We already kind of talked about it.
We'll talk about it, I'm sure, at length. And that one is the juiciest one online. That one is probably the most hotly debated one online. And of course it is. Of course.
People don't like believing that their memory of things is wrong. I mean, I get in small arguments with my wife about it where we'll be talking and I'll be like, yeah, remember you said this last week? And she's like, I never said that. Oh, I definitely remember you said that. And she's like, no, because I remember the conversation. You were sitting over here, I was sitting over there. We hold so true to what our memories are. And I mean, going to just another example of a very famous podcast, Serial, talking about, Adnan and all that, the very first episode of it, they ask all these kids questions, innocent questions about what they did last week, a month ago, and they can't remember it all. And in the trial, they're asking about something extremely important, not trivial, things you think you would remember, and people's stories are changing all the time. They don't remember, they think they remember, some swear they remember, and then their story changes. I mean, our memories are not as good as we think they are. And that's what it comes down to, is are we willing to admit that with this? Or are we going to hold true? And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to hold true to this bucket list. I'm going to hold true. I can't think of any specific examples where my grandfather said it or where my dad said it or wherever. But I'm going to hold true.
Yeah. I think you have to. I mean, sure. If I'm going to give on any one of these, perhaps the bucket list is the one that I would say, okay, fine. You want to think that I'm misremembering doing that in high school? Fine. But, I'll die on a hill with some of these. This one, fine. I don't care. You know what? The movie, boring probably anyways, right? About a couple old people. They probably die at the end. I'm sure at least one of them does. Which is why I've never seen the movie, because, again, why would I ever pay to go see a sad movie like that where I know I'm going to cry? Like, what's the point? But, so fine. You want this one? You know what, government? You got this one. I'll give you this one. But this is the only one you're going to get. This is it.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple on this list where I wouldn't even be able to put up a fight because I've never seen the movie or I've never heard that phrase or known that person or whatever, which is fine. Those are for conversations where I hope when we get to those episodes, I'll ask those around me if they're aware and then have conversations with them and get some insight. But yeah, there's some on this list where I feel like if push came to shove, I don't know that I would use this one as my defense that history has changed. Berenstein Bears, though, I will be willing to. That's a hill I would die on. Bucket list, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna believe it for now, but I'll throw it in my defense, and if it gets enough evidence against it, I might say, okay, yeah, I'll concede. But
It's the newest one, right? I don't think there's a newer one than this.
there might be. I don't know. I looked through a more recent updated list, and this one seems to be pretty high up there. I don't remember if there are any above it. It is just more timely because it was going around on social media a couple months ago, so might be more fresh in the listeners' minds. So
It is kind of interesting to think, like, if we do this for a long time, there are going to be new ones that crop up while we're doing this, where people are going to discover things while we are doing this.
I wonder if at some point there will be a Mandela effect about the Mandela effect, where they will say, oh, it's never been called Mandela effect, it's always been called this, and we're like, no, we've been doing stuff with this phrase for a long time. It's not a collective misremembering of the title of this issue here. So I don't know.
All of a sudden we go back and we look and all the titles are changed.
All of our someone went in.
Oh my gosh.
Changed everything. That's why back up. I'm gonna back up all these episodes. Yeah. I'm not just gonna let them live out in the cloud where they live for all the listeners. I gotta save these on a thumb drive somewhere so that when the time comes, I can pull them back out.
Yeah, you have to. At some point, we have to do an episode on CERN. It's not a Mandela effect, but it is certainly an explanation that a lot of people have. That I think we could do a long form conversation on that. That will lead to many other things.
And that one, I think we need to wait a little bit.
So Elon gets Twitter.
Elon gets Twitter. And so we can get some more information, for ourselves and have because I looked up a little bit. There's so much. I would love to see both sides and make a stance, but it does seem like that is an explanation for this quite a bit. So I don't know. I still choose to believe that I heard this phrase before. There's two different pieces of evidence just in this Reddit thread that say this is not the case. So
yeah, dispel this. It's funny because when I did Google it, like the sources that come up are so stupid. It's like Her Magazine. Like, who reads Her Magazine, right?
I'm sure there are people who read it, but I've never heard of the magazine.
5 people who read it. Those 5 people, I will refute what we just saw on Reddit. Her Magazine. Do a follow-up article and tell me how this person's wrong on Reddit. Did they make this up? Maybe.
And that's the thing, is that like on these 2 sites, these 2 blogs, is it possible you could just code in whatever date you wanted for those? Probably. I can't. We'd have to look at the code, and I work with developers. If there's anyone who wants to try to get in, see if you can see the timestamp around when this was adjusted. Was it adjusted? I don't know what the code base is. HTML probably, but just for those blogs. But I don't know. I'm just going to choose to believe there's nothing really riding on this for me. It's more annoying that it's like, come on, everyone, we're all on the same page, right? This existed before 2007.
Yes.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I think on this one we just have to say, you know what, there's proof on one side and there's proof on the other, and you can decide on your own.
I will say, this one seems to have more proof for our memories than normal. A lot of, when you look up the Berenstein Bears,
you find nothing.
You find nothing that it was spelled that way. It's all the covers you see, it's all spelled the way they want you to believe it's spelled. So, I don't know.
Well, this one's new. They haven't had a chance yet.
They haven't had a chance to wipe the history. Yeah,
to wipe
that's true.
everything.
That's true. So we'll pick an old one. We might just have to do the Berenstein Bears next week because we talked about it enough.
That's the mother of all.
I know, but just
maybe I'm fine doing it. Get it out of the way. There's a million of them. We're not going to run out of content.
I hope not. I hope not.
There's no way.
Oh, well, I think that's all I got on the bucket list.
I think so.
I'm excited about the future episodes, more conversation. For anyone who's listening, either on a podcast application or if you're watching on YouTube or listening on YouTube, feel free to comment. Let us know what you think.
Please comment.
Provide evidence that we're wrong. Provide evidence that we're right. I just want to know what the truth is.
Yes.
I'm willing to believe if I'm wrong and there's enough evidence to prove that I'm wrong, great.
Sure.
I want to know what the truth is.
Right. Absolutely. And, that's all it's about is knowing what the truth is and being, confident in that.
Yeah.
So yes, comment, please. Share your examples. Share evidence. I'd love it. I'd love to see it.
And I would love if there was enough interaction where we could go back and do a follow-up and say, we talked about this.
Yeah.
Here's comments we had. Here's people who say absolutely not. Here's more evidence. Do research. Don't listen to us. Don't listen to the internet necessarily. Do your research. Go to a library. Go to librarianavengers.org.
You go to the library, you might find something.
I mean, we're just providing the platform for the discussion. And I hope that it ends up that we end up figuring out what the truth is and go from there.
That's right.
So, well, Scott, thank you as always. It's a pleasure doing this with you.
Thank you. It is as well.
Looking forward to next week's episode, which we will not disclose until the time comes, but appreciate everyone listening. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.